Before we begin, we would like to remind you that translation assistance and live streaming services are available. If you require interpretation services, please go to the left side of the room. I would like to welcome you to all distinguished guests, representatives of multilateral organizations, members of the financial sector, indigenous communities, civil society, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Embassy of Colombia in the United States, and with the support of the Mission of Colombia to the Organization of American States, we are honored to welcome you to this dialogue concerning the conservation of the last great flying river in the Amazon. This event aligns with the mandate established by the presidents of the Amazonian countries at the Belém do Pará Summit. Today, we gather to discuss a matter of utmost significance: the Amazon as a strategic pillar for the environmental, economic, and social stability of our planet, which contributes 20% of the world's fresh water through its last great flying river. Therefore, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Ambassador Luis Ernesto Vargas, Permanent Representative of Colombia to the OAS. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Bueno, muy buenos días para todos ustedes, señoras y señores. Estamos en este evento de convergencia amazónica y las innovaciones intersectoriales que tengan que ver para la conservación del último gran río que nos queda, que es el río volador del Amazonas. De manera que es un honor para nosotros estar aquí el día de hoy entre ustedes, quienes asisten personalmente y quienes lo van a hacer también por streaming, quienes nos están viendo, para darles una bienvenida a este importante foro. Aquí habrá un espacio de discusión que esperamos sea muy abierto, muy franco, muy sustancial, sobre la generación de convergencias para que avancemos todos en un objetivo común, que es preservar el medio ambiente, proteger el bioma amazónico, y por esa circunstancia es importante agradecerle tanto a ustedes por la compañía como a quienes van a presentar el foro el día de hoy. La activa participación que ustedes van a observar nos permitirá seguir avanzando, porque es lo que queremos todos, seguir avanzando en el camino de conservar y consolidar, elaborar una hoja de ruta hacia la conferencia que va a hacer Naciones Unidas sobre el cambio climático de 2025 en la COP30. Para ese fin es necesario generar acuerdos frente a asuntos como los mecanismos que garanticen la calidad y sobre todo la cuantificación en lo que es tener recursos para enfrentar la emergencia climática. Ustedes saben bien que el tema empezó hablándose de un cambio climático. 5 años estuvimos hablando de cambio climático. Pero ya después pasamos a algo ya muy grave, que es una crisis climática. Y tampoco fue suficiente que lo estuviéramos pregonando y diciendo en todos los países y en las COPs. Y de ahí pasamos ya a una emergencia climática. Ahora estamos a punto de un colapso climático. Y si no lo detenemos, pues simple y llanamente estamos en el más grave riesgo que haya afrontado la humanidad. Por eso, pues hay que agradecer a la embajada bilateral que se ha unido, en este caso con la misión a mi cargo, para que mostremos una vez más el compromiso del gobierno de Colombia frente a esta emergencia, que como lo ha expuesto el presidente Gustavo Petro Urrego, y ustedes lo han escuchado constantemente en Naciones Unidas y en cuanto foro existe al respecto, desde cuando asumió la presidencia el 7 de agosto del año 2022, que este es el principal reto que enfrenta la humanidad. Por esta razón, Colombia hoy avanza en la búsqueda de consensos, es lo que queremos que avancemos el día de hoy, para que tengamos justicia y acción climática, las transiciones justas, la conservación del medio ambiente y la protección de la biodiversidad a través de este tipo de eventos generarán iniciativas en el sistema multilateral. Y en este sentido, quiero destacar que es con este convencimiento que Colombia se ha comprometido a acoger la quinta reunión de presidentes de la Organización del Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica, el OTCA, precedida por una serie de diálogos amazónicos que organizaremos con la participación de comunidades indígenas, sociedad civil, academia, científicos, con el objetivo de continuar avanzando en la preservación del Amazonas, así como la expectativa de establecer lineamientos claros y una posición convergente de cara a esa COP30. Como ustedes saben, Colombia y Chile hemos formulado ante la Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos una solicitud para que la Corte se pronuncie, una opinión consultiva ante la Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos para que se establezcan por parte de la Corte cuáles son los lineamientos que deben acogerse por parte de los gobiernos, independientemente de la posición que asuman de carácter ideológico. No sé si es que alguien todavía tenga la idea de que esto tiene algo que ver con lo ideológico. No, aquí se trata simple y llanamente de preservar la humanidad frente a la emergencia climática, pero que entonces, al margen de la manera como se miren las cosas, que se establezcan, que se determinen cuáles son los lineamientos que debe mínimamente acoger cada gobierno para proteger a sus comunidades más vulnerables. Todo esto tiene que ver con el tema que vamos a escuchar el día de hoy. Y pues por supuesto que ustedes no vinieron a escucharme a mí, sino a los verdaderos científicos sobre el tema. Así que quiero concluir este espacio simplemente de saludo con el anhelo de que tengamos un diálogo constructivo para todas las partes, que nos permita avanzar en esta importante agenda común en la conservación de la Amazonia, y que ojalá pronto tengamos la noticia sobre cómo la Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos ha emitido esa opinión consultiva. Nosotros ya agotamos todo lo que teníamos que hacer frente a la Corte, participamos en las audiencias públicas, expusimos a nombre de Colombia lo que nosotros consideramos que deben ser lineamientos para esa opinión consultiva, y por esa circunstancia creo que con eso también colaboramos con este tema que hoy nos concita, la convergencia amazónica y la protección de ese gran pulmón del mundo que es la Amazonia, que además tiene que ver con varios países de Latinoamérica. Así que bienvenidos, muchas gracias y ojalá les saquemos harto provecho al foro. Buen día.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Your support has been invaluable in preparing for this event. Now we will hear from Mark Lambrides, Director of the Department of Sustainable Development of the Organization of American States. Mr. Lambridis, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Ambassador Vargas, thank you for those tremendous opening remarks, and thank you to your embassy and to the Permanent Mission for organizing this critical event. Distinguished ambassadors, honorable representatives of Amazonian countries, esteemed indigenous leaders, respected experts, dear friends, on behalf of the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, who sends his regrets and could not be with us today, I'm pleased to extend a most cordial welcome to this, the House of the Americas, this space that belongs to all peoples of our hemisphere. Today we're brought together by a transcendental purpose, the protection of the Amazon's last great flying river. It's no coincidence that as we gather here in this organization, since its foundations, the OAS has sought to coordinate efforts where we face common challenges that transcend national borders. The Amazon, this immense biological and cultural treasure, is not simply a geographical area shared by several member states. It is the planetary heart that pumps and generates 20% of the world's rainwater. This amazing atmospheric phenomenon known as the last great flying river, as the ambassador has already referenced. We face inescapable reality. The Amazon is at a critical tipping point with 17% deforestation and risk of ecological collapse if we reach 20 to 25% threshold. We face potentially devastating consequences for global multidimensional security. This is not just an environmental agenda, but rather concerns food and water, energy, economic, and our very social security of the hemisphere and really the entire world. The OAS as a space for hemispheric dialogue enthusiastically welcomes this initiative, which connects many sectors of our societies, from public to private, local communities, and organized civil society. The historical example of the technological, military, industrial complex that mobilized unprecedented resources during World War II shows us the power of multi-sectoral collaboration in facing such existential threats. Today, we need to create a new nature-based economic financial complex that defines the geopolitics of the 21st century and ensures the well-being of our societies and shared ecosystems. Integration through environmental protection and the preservation of our shared ecosystems is not only an ecological necessity, but an incomparable opportunity for shared prosperity in our hemisphere. The Amazon, with its immense biodiversity and its crucial role in global climate regulation, offers us the possibility of reimagining our economic, financial, and cooperation systems. Therefore, the OAS celebrates and supports this Amazonian convergence as we inaugurate this event today. The dialogues, proposals, and initiatives that emerge from these meetings will be fundamental for the preparation of the COP30 and the Summit of the Amazonian Presidents to be held in August of this year. Allow me to conclude with a call to action. The protection of the Amazon and its last great flying river cannot wait. Each day that passes without concrete actions brings us closer to the point of no return. The Amazon and the Americas have historic responsibility to this vital ecosystem, not only for our hemisphere, but really all of humanity. The OAS is committed to this cause and makes available to all of you its convening capacity, the cooperation mechanisms, and the political will to advance this path of protection and sustainable development. I wish you a very successful event, full of fruitful dialogues, and above all, concrete commitments for the Amazon and the shared ecosystems of all the Americas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce Martin von Hildebrand, Secretary General of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, who will share regional perspectives regarding the coordination among Amazonian countries in preparation for COP30. Mr. von Hildebrand, the floor is yours.
Well, good day to everybody. I would like to thank perdón, voy a hablar en castellano. La Organización de Estados Americanos por recibirnos aquí. Quiero agradecer a las embajadas de Colombia por tenernos. Quiero agradecer a la Fundación Gaia Amazonas que fue motor detrás de esta organización, para esta organización. Quiero agradecer a ustedes todos por estar aquí presentes y acompañarnos en el día de hoy. Yo soy secretario de la Organización del Tratado Amazónico, el Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica. Y quiero resaltar simplemente un par de palabras ahí. ¿Qué es ese tratado? Algunos lo conocen, algunos no. Pero la importancia de ese tratado es que es la única organización que existe que coordina a los otros países. Y por lo tanto, cuando hablamos de la Amazonía, es el Tratado de Cooperación que tiene sobre sus espaldas la coordinación regional. Evidentemente, el tratado son los países, el tratado son los 8 países, y tiene una Secretaría General que coordina, y en eso me han pedido a mí que asuma el cargo. Hace un mes estoy comenzando esa nueva tarea. Yo soy alguien que ha pasado 50 años en la Amazonía, he vivido con los pueblos indígenas principalmente, los he acompañado en que obtengan sus territorios. Hemos logrado mucho, hemos logrado 26 millones de hectáreas de territorios. Luego acompañarlos en el reconocimiento de sus derechos con la OIT y luego con la Constitución, y luego acompañarlos en montar sus gobiernos propios con la Fundación Gaia. Entonces, pues esa es mi trayectoria para que más o menos me ubiquen. Vengo del Mambiadero, vengo de la Maloca, y pasé a las oficinas del Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica. Vamos a hablar hoy de los ríos voladores. Y para hablar de los ríos voladores tenemos que hablar del funcionamiento de la selva amazónica. Evidentemente, los ríos voladores son un producto, como ustedes bien saben. Un árbol secuestra en un área similar que el mar, por decir una hectárea con hectárea, un árbol secuestra 7 veces más, emite 7 veces más vapor o humedad que una hectárea de mar, porque los árboles tienen raíces profundas y emiten. Y si no, como ustedes se podrán imaginar, si no tenemos una evaporación en el mar y llueve y luego se evapora y llueve y evapora, llegaría muy poca agua a la cordillera, pero llega más agua de lo que comienza en el mar. Y si usted mira Manaos, el 80% del agua que llega a Manaos es agua que ha sido evaporado del subsuelo. Entonces, es importante tener en cuenta que si hablamos de los ríos voladores, estamos hablando del funcionamiento de la Amazonía. No voy a entrar a mencionar mucho sobre la importancia de la Amazonía. Ya los que me precedieron hablaron de la importancia de la Amazonía, de los, llamémoslos, servicios ambientales, entre otros, no solo es el río volador. Con la evaporación y la transpiración que producen las nubes blancas reflejan el sol. Entonces, aquí tenemos un sistema de refrigeración, tanto por la evaporación como por el sol reflejado por las nubes blancas. Tenemos también por la biodiversidad mayor resiliencia del planeta para adaptarse al cambio climático. Hay muchos servicios que tiene la Amazonía. El agua del río volador es fundamental porque suben 22 billones de toneladas de agua diarias a la cordillera y se reparten, y el producto nacional de los países amazónicos depende, y la zona andina dependen de esta agua. Es decir, si perdiéramos los ríos voladores, estamos perdiendo el agua para toda esta región, lo cual genera no solo hambre. Ya estamos viendo en Bogotá, tenemos problemas de agua, estamos viendo en Quito también, en energía. Es decir, perder el agua del río Amazonas, o el agua de la Amazonía y del río volador, sería una catástrofe para todos. Las principales amenazas, ustedes también las resaltaron, las principales amenazas que teníamos hoy es la deforestación, es la minería ilegal y ya lo mencionaba una expositora hace un momento, que ya estamos en el 17% de la deforestación y si llegamos al 20-25% la selva se comienza a degradar y se puede volver efectivamente una sabana pobre, porque ya sea una sabana degradada con toda la biodiversidad muerta y pues, prácticamente un desierto. Si eso sucede, perdemos el 40% del agua en la zona andina, que sería catastrófico, como digo, migraciones, violencia, etc. Entonces, realmente estamos dependiendo de la Amazonía, que ha sido, no puedo decir desafortunadamente, pero que ha sido el patio de atrás de nuestros países. Yo soy colombiano, ha sido el patio de atrás para toda la zona andina, pero inclusive para el Brasil, a pesar de ser un país amazónico, ha sido una área donde está menos presente el gobierno, menos atendido, y realmente a eso se debe que tengamos hoy que hacer el esfuerzo, porque uno de los problemas centrales que tenemos también es la inseguridad. ¿Qué es lo que han hecho los países? ¿Qué es lo que han hecho los países individualmente, por su lado? Pues para comenzar, los países han firmado los acuerdos de biodiversidad, de clima, de desarrollo sostenible, y esto ha sido muy importante. Y han hecho un esfuerzo a partir de ahí, han hecho un esfuerzo efectivamente para detener la deforestación, a veces con más y menos éxito, pero por ejemplo Colombia últimamente ha logrado reducir el 40%, en Brasil el 49%, a comienzos del siglo también en el primer gobierno de Lula redujeron mucho más de la mitad. En fin, han avanzado en la reducción de la biodiversidad, digo de la deforestación. También han ido restaurando en diferentes zonas y un buen ejemplo, y no sé si podemos proyectar un mapita aquí que me parece interesante, el mapa de áreas protegidas, territorios indígenas. ¿Alguien tiene ese control? Porque me parece que es un muy buen ejemplo de lo que han hecho los países, pero no sé si estamos obteniendo una respuesta. Esto es deforestación, la deforestación en la Amazonía, la que ustedes están viendo ahorita. Y el próximo, por favor. Eso, opa, ya. Entonces quiero resaltar esto porque es interesante. ¿Qué han hecho los países? Los países han reconocido las áreas protegidas que están en amarillo y los territorios indígenas que están en amarillo y las áreas protegidas que están en verde. ¿Por qué es interesante? Porque el 47% de la Amazonía está bajo algún sistema o alguna figura de protección. El 25% de la Amazonía es propiedad indígena, lo cual muestra que los pueblos indígenas tienen un puesto, tienen que estar sentados en la mesa de la toma de decisiones. Sin los pueblos indígenas no podemos salvar la Amazonía, porque tenemos que lograr la conectividad. Aquí se ha logrado, se ha creado esto, y si ustedes saben muy bien que cuando hablamos de biodiversidad, con el convenio de biodiversidad, estamos hablando del 30-30, que el 30% de los países estén bajo alguna figura de protección para el 2030. Aquí tenemos el 47%. Si el Amazonas fuera un país, estaríamos 30%, la tercera parte más avanzados que cualquier otro país del mundo. Y ya lo tenemos. Y sin embargo, seguimos colapsando. O sea, los países sí han hecho un esfuerzo. Claro que también en los países sabemos que hay deforestación, también sabemos que hay inseguridad, también sabemos que hay muchos problemas. Y resalto otra vez el problema de inseguridad. El problema de inseguridad es gravísimo. La inseguridad y la criminalidad se ha tomado Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Perú, Brasil, en la Amazonía. Y es evidentemente que mientras haya problemas de criminalidad, que estoy hablando pues de criminalidad, de tráfico de armas, de todo el problema de la deforestación ilegal, la minería ilegal, todos estos problemas, Todos esos problemas impiden que pueda trabajar uno realmente en la restauración y en evitar la deforestación, porque estamos contra una fuerza, a pesar del enorme esfuerzo que ha hecho el gobierno, la criminalidad tiene más plata y más organización que los mismos gobiernos. Entonces es un tema complicado, es un tema muy complicado, pero que nos toca evidentemente abordar. Ahora, ¿a qué se debe que decimos seguimos colapsando, seguimos perdiendo? Se puede ver muchos factores, pero un factor que los gobiernos tomaron conciencia es si trabajan en conjunto, ¿qué pueden lograr? La OTCA, que es una institución que ha tenido importancia, que ha venido dirigido y manejado por las cancillerías, en agosto del 23, en la declaración de Belén con los presidentes, realmente da un brinco enorme. Es decir, se reúnen los presidentes de los 8 países y dicen, vamos a trabajar de la mano, vamos a trabajar juntos. Y esto es un cambio fundamental. Es decir, ahora tenemos que ellos se ponen de acuerdo, ¿no?, en trabajar juntos y, digamos, sacan una declaración. Luego lo van a retomar los ministros los cancilleres y sacar unas resoluciones. ¿Por qué lo tienen que tomar los ministros? Porque los presidentes no son parte de la estructura de la OTCA. Le van a poner esta responsabilidad al Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica. Pero los que están a la cabeza del Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica son los ministros, los cancilleres, y por lo tanto tienen que pasar esto a una resolución para que se vuelva vinculante. Pero en esta declaración ellos están adelante con 3 puntos fundamentales, podríamos decir. Un punto es el punto de no retorno. Es decir, entre todos tenemos lo que acabamos de decir. Vamos en 47% de deforestación. Si llegamos al 2025, la selva comienza a colapsar. Hay que evitar el colapso, hay que evitar el punto de no retorno, que es un concepto que sacan de tipping point, de evitar el punto de no retorno. Esto es en el centro de todo lo que se haga desde el punto de vista de los países amazónicos. En el centro está la vida. En el centro se puede hacer negocios, se puede entrar en la empresa privada, sí, pero siempre y cuando en el centro esté la vida. En el centro esté evitar el punto de no retorno. Y de ahí para adelante podemos hablar. Pero esto es fundamental, es un principio que están de acuerdo todos los países. Se pusieron de acuerdo todos los presidentes. El segundo punto fundamental para ello resalta, el segundo punto que resalta es el desarrollo sostenible. Evidentemente tenemos que tener un desarrollo sostenible porque tenemos una población de 50 millones de personas que habitan la Amazonía y ellos tienen que lograr un bienestar. Ellos tienen que lograr que una vida razonable, una vida digna, y por lo tanto el desarrollo sostenible es fundamental, no lo podemos sacrificar únicamente pensando en el medio ambiente. Y el tercero, que es un gran cambio para la OTCA, y para esto es la participación de la sociedad civil. La participación que no, la OTCA, el Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica, al cual le están dando esta responsabilidad de adelantar lo que estoy hablando, hasta ahora había sido cerrado, o no cerrado, estaba limitado, o la palabra que quieran utilizar, estaba en manos únicamente del gobierno, de las cancillerías. Ahora entra la sociedad civil. ¿Qué significa eso? No es solo democracia, pero es democracia. Es ante todo que solo los gobiernos no pueden. Están conscientes que sin la población local, sin los pueblos indígenas, que tienen una cuarta parte de la Amazonía, sin los campesinos, sin la población sin lo local, sin los científicos, no van a poder salvar la selva. Los científicos, la sociedad civil organizada, inclusive los movimientos religiosos, todos tienen incidencia en la construcción. Tenemos que construirlo entre todos. Por lo tanto, la participación es fundamental. Dentro de los puntos que ellos resaltan, voy a dar algunos, no voy a dar todos, pero dentro de los puntos, las tareas que nos ponen, comienzan o no comienzan, pero hablan de la seguridad pública. La seguridad ambiental es fundamental. Tenemos que luchar contra la criminalidad, porque la criminalidad en la minería, la criminalidad en la deforestación es fundamental. Es por ahí que tenemos que comenzar a reducir. Y cuando hablo de la minería, hablo del mercurio, hablo de la polución del agua y hablo también, evidentemente, la deforestación y necesitamos restaurar. O sea, para sacar adelante el Amazonas tenemos que combatir y neutralizar en la medida de lo posible la criminalidad. Es importante también resaltar, y como lo van a ver, lo voy a mencionar, es solo si trabajamos juntos los países podemos combatir la criminalidad. La criminalidad no se puede combatir en Colombia y Brasil solos porque se nos escapa por otro país. Tenemos que asegurar que todos tengan el nivel jurídico, la capacidad institucional, la capacidad personal, la visión política para controlar la criminalidad. Es en conjunto que lo podemos manejar. Otro tema que resaltan es nuevas economías. Tenemos que buscar una economía que sea ecológicamente o ambientalmente amable. Tenemos que superar el extractivismo. Tenemos que montar economías. Han hablado de socioeconomía, podemos hablar del valor de los ríos, de los servicios ambientales como el río Volador. Tenemos que mirar los servicios que presta el Amazonas al resto del mundo y al continente. Es enorme. Eso nunca se le ha puesto un precio. No se paga por el agua que tenemos en Bogotá. Tomamos que lo que es de la naturaleza es gratuito. Tenemos que comenzar a ver que no lo es. No miramos la vida en sí. Por ejemplo, vemos un árbol de aguacates y decimos el aguacate vale tanto. ¿Y cuánto vale el árbol? ¿La madre no vale, solo vale el hijo? Es decir, ¿de qué estamos hablando? Tenemos que mirar más allá. Y porque en nuestro mundo le ponemos valor. Los indígenas no, los indígenas le ponen otro valor que es su naturaleza, pero nosotros le ponemos el valor económico y por ahí tenemos que trabajar. Es nuestro sistema, ¿no? Tenemos que mirar la ciencia y la tecnología, fundamental, pero también el conocimiento tradicional. Este conocimiento tradicional, diferente a la ciencia y tecnología, no se fundamenta en lo racional. El conocimiento indígena se fundamenta en la relación profunda con el medio ambiente. Me atrevo a decir, con la intimidad. Un chamán le dice, yo miro un árbol hasta que yo me vuelva árbol. Quiere decir, hasta que yo me conecte su energía. Ellos desde niños, desde que nacen prácticamente, tienen una dieta especial, se dedican a la meditación, son especializados hasta más que un doctorado nuestro. En eso, en esa profundidad de relacionarse energéticamente con el entorno. Es otro conocimiento, tan antiguo como el nuestro, pero de otra manera. Ese conocimiento no lo podemos perder. Todavía tenemos diversidad cultural, tenemos pueblos indígenas. Esto entonces resaltan los presidentes la importancia de la ciencia, pero también del conocimiento tradicional. También articular con la academia, evidentemente que entra en este marco. Miramos la salud, y no solo porque vendrán más epidemias, pero miramos una salud que ustedes conocen bien, que hoy la OMS la están promoviendo mucho, es la salud del medio ambiente. Necesitamos la salud del medio ambiente y la salud de las personas. Nuestra salud depende del medio ambiente. Este es otro tema que ellos resaltan. Obviamente la mitigación y adaptación en el manejo integral de los bosques es otro tema, ya lo hemos mencionado, reducir la deforestación, la restauración. Aquí vemos un ejemplo, en este mapa vemos, por ejemplo, aquí lo que es fundamental es la conectividad, porque un área aislada no funciona, tenemos que conectarlo. ¿Por qué resalto esto aquí? ¿Y por qué lo que estoy hablando es importante desde el Amazonas? Porque es que mire que sí hemos hecho. No es que estamos comenzando en cero. Y ya tenemos, mire todo esto que tenemos protegido. Consolidémoslo, cosechemos lo que tenemos. Tenemos leyes, tenemos acuerdos, tenemos conocimiento científico, tenemos los pueblos indígenas. Tenemos la capacidad de trabajar el Amazonas. Está ahí, no estamos comenzando en cero. No es un problema imposible. Necesitamos voluntad política y necesitamos financiación. Y obviamente necesitamos conocimiento científico. Y para eso es una responsabilidad de todo el globo. Es una responsabilidad global. ¿Por qué? Porque nosotros podemos arreglar el Amazonas, o decir, avanzar nosotros los países. Pero es que hay otro factor que también nos afecta, que es el calentamiento global. En los países que están emitiendo más CO2 que nosotros y están calentando, tienen que mitigar su CO2, porque si se calienta el planeta, se quema la Amazonía de todas formas, independiente de lo que nosotros hagamos. Es una responsabilidad conjunta que tenemos que abordarlo. Y los países, sus países, los países conjuntamente abordarlo y los países del norte también cumplir y apoyar financieramente y con sus compromisos ambientales. Sin embargo, porque ya tenemos, como le mencioné, y hay muchos otros. También tenemos en la OTSA un observatorio regional amazónico que es fundamental. Podemos hacer el monitoreo, si estamos llegando al punto de retorno o no. Monitoreo de los fuegos. Tenemos redes también de redes de fuego, de agua, de bosques. Cuando hablo de redes, ¿qué quiero decir? Los 8 países con sus ministerios de medio ambiente, con sus ministerios científicos, hemos formado redes, entre ellos los especialistas, para trabajar esta temática. Hemos sido respaldados mucho por el Banco Interamericano, respaldado por el Banco Mundial, respaldado por Noruega, sí, pero sí tenemos estas redes que ya están funcionando, tenemos que fortalecerlo, pero tenemos con qué trabajar. Cuando menciono los temas, todos estos temas que menciono, hay grupos de trabajo, hay acuerdos, estamos trabajando, o sea, sí estamos avanzando en esta materia. O sea, hay esperanza, a pesar de todo lo terrible que oímos en las comunicaciones, hay esperanzas. Y si no funciona el Amazonas, no tendremos ríos voladores. Entonces el tema del río voladores es fundamental y nos lleva allá. Y un punto más, ahorita hablábamos de la COP30. En la COP30 lo que vamos a tener es las NDCs, the National Commitments, Determined Commitments. Es decir, ahí cada país desde París ha dicho vamos a hacer tanto para, y aquí tenemos grandes especialistas en la materia, vamos a comprometernos a mitigar, vamos a comprometernos a restaurar, etcétera, etcétera, en ciertas proporciones o en cierta cantidad para el año 2030 o para el año 2050, vamos a parar la deforestación, etcétera. Todos los países han hecho su compromiso. Hemos revisado todo eso para ver las sinergias, para ver cómo se complementan. Y ahora, para el COP30, vuelven. Lo que estamos promoviendo en este momento es que, aunque cada país tiene sus compromisos nacionales, estamos promoviendo que se incluya uno más. Un compromiso más, en que todos los países digan, nos comprometemos a defender la funcionalidad, la Amazonía desde el punto de vista de su función, la funcionalidad de la región amazónica. ¿Por qué es la diferencia? ¿Cuál es? Porque no se trata, no cada solo un país fundamental, pero si comenzamos a mirar el sistema amazónico, cómo funciona el sistema, y lo defendemos conjuntamente, estamos hablando a una forma cualitativamente diferente. Estamos mirando el funcionamiento y no solo la mitigación y la restauración o la adaptación. Ese ya es un paso fundamental. ¿Y cuál es el paso fundamental para la 2030, de la COP30? Porque si llegamos que cada país sumando, esto es lo que nosotros estamos mitigando, perfecto. Importantísimo, eso es bien importante. Pero si hablamos, estamos conjuntamente defendiendo, protegiendo el fortalecimiento del ecosistema, protegiendo el Amazonas como un gran sistema. Y ya no estamos negociando internacionalmente las mitigaciones, estamos negociando un sistema, estamos ganando la Amazonía en su conjunto. Ya estamos hablando y ya nosotros hablamos a otro nivel y a otro nivel de discusión. Estamos hablando de la Amazonía en su conjunto y no solo lo que hace cada país. Por lo tanto, pasar de los países, que es fundamental, a una visión integral, lo venimos discutiendo con los ministerios de Medio Ambiente, con Brasil, con Colombia, con Bolivia, con Ecuador, con todos, y simplemente al llegar a los gobiernos les decimos, miren, no estamos pidiendo nada nuevo, pongamos de acuerdo que entre todos vamos a defender esto. Y vamos a buscar los recursos adicionales para mirar esta relación. Estamos pasando de espacios donde estamos mitigando a la relación ecosistémica. Y esto va a ser un cambio fundamental. Entonces, esto es lo que estamos impulsando en este momento. Por último, estamos yendo, claro, a la COP30, ustedes ya lo han resaltado, nos queda muy poquito tiempo, tenemos un año corto. Ahorita en agosto la reunión de presidentes, muy importante la reunión de los 8 presidentes, porque ahí van a decidir qué van a llevar a la COP30. Es el momento que los presidentes tienen que llegar con este acuerdo y si sacan este nuevo compromiso, llegar a la COP30 a presentar y a defender estos puntos de vista. Nosotros, desde la OTSA, también vamos a tener allá un espacio donde todos están invitados, donde se venga a discutir se me va siempre la palabra, no es un galpón, sino un pabellón, gracias. Un pabellón importante la OTSA, donde se invita a todo el mundo a conversar, a discutir y a analizar cuestiones amazónicos, y donde el gobierno también los gobiernos tengan sus espacios también para dialogar y negociar. Entonces, en resumen, ¿cómo está avanzando? Los países están enfrentando el problema, lo están ahora enfrentando conjuntamente, estamos mirando esto desde una visión regional, y lo que tenemos que es fortalecer la organización del Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica, que tiene esas tres ventajas. Tiene la cuestión política, en el sentido de reunir políticamente a los países, tiene el conocimiento a través de la ciencia, la tecnología y el observatorio regional, y tiene la participación social, que es fundamental, que los pueblos indígenas, las comunidades locales, hay espacios de mecanismo de cooperación y de participación permanente, como también los diálogos amazónicos que les permite participar y recomendar a los gobiernos. Entonces, estamos realmente avanzando en esta temática. La cuestión es fortalecernos, la cuestión es avanzar, es conseguir recursos, y lo que no tenemos es tiempo. El tiempo se está agotando, porque realmente la selva se está quemando. Entonces, nuestro afán es el tiempo, y este año es el año político, el año de la COP30. Hoy en día, este es el momento en que todos están mirando el Amazonas. Si no logramos de aquí a la COP30, después de la COP30 volvemos otra vez a ese estado normal que nos olvidan. Entonces, señores, les agradezco mucho, muy amables por escuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. von Hildebrand. We remind you to be aware of the time, since we only have until 11 a.m. Now, we will proceed to watch a video presentation by Dr. Germán Poveda, who will elucidate the phenomenon of the last great flying river of the Amazon.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to contribute to this highly relevant event. I'm going to talk about the flying rivers of South America and the Amazon River Basin, and how deforestation is threatening such fundamental climatic and environmental services for South America and for the world. Next slide, please. So the Amazon is a critical element of the Earth's climate system. Okay. Next one, please. Okay, that's one. So the Amazon is a critical element of the Earth's climate system because it reduces land surface temperatures, it generates rainfall, it stores around 20 billion tons of carbon in its soils and vegetation. It evapotranspires more than 20 billion tons of water every day and exerts a strong influence on the atmospheric circulation patterns, not only in South America, but also globally. And such an important role is due to two factors: its size, which is 7 million square kilometers, and its location in tropical South America. The basin produces about 16% of all photosynthesis in the biosphere and provide the largest river discharge in the world. But the Amazon is not an empty ecosystem. More than 47 million people live in the Amazon, of which 2.2 million are indigenous peoples. Next slide, please. This is a video. Can you? Okay. So fundamental to the function of the Amazon ecosystem is the role of the aerial rivers, which are also known as flying rivers. They are vast atmospheric flows carrying water vapor over long distances. They are fundamental to the global hydrological cycle and contribute to precipitation and regional climates. Here in this animation, we can see how moisture from oceanic and terrestrial sources crosses South America, transported by the trade winds and by several jet streams. In particular, the Orinoco low-level jet transport moisture from the Atlantic Ocean to the Andes, where it shifts south in the form of the South American low-level jet, transporting a tremendous amount of moisture to the southeastern South America, and even reaching to places like the La Plata River Basin and southeastern South America. Next, please. But besides the water vapor evaporated from the Atlantic Ocean and carried inland by the aerial rivers, water vapor required for rainfall in the Amazon comes from the rainforest evapotranspiration. This factor, which is known as recycled rainfall, provides between 35 to 50% of precipitation in the Amazon, and thus the importance of halting deforestation and of recovering degraded forest. Next, please. So in this video, this video shows the two previous mechanisms in action. The video is going to show us the so-called beating of the Amazon hydroclimate. The video illustrates the diurnal and the nocturnal cycle of evapotranspiration over South America. The video has been made with the results of a highly sophisticated climate model, and it is a 3D visualization of humidity over the Amazon basin from December 2004 through March 2005. The green and white areas represent higher levels of moisture, water vapor from oceanic evaporation, and from the rainforest evapotranspiration, and purple areas show lower humidity. As you can see, the Andes form a clear western boundary, and as time progresses, noted at the top right, you can see the shifting extent and concentration of water vapor across the region. You can see how moisture accumulates over the rainforest and is then funneled south and east, illustrating how Amazonian water vapor is transported across the continent. So this computational modeling is very nice, because water vapor, we humans cannot see water vapor, but you can color the water vapor concentration in a computer simulation. As I said, this is a very sophisticated climate model which is able to represent very detailed processes of the interaction between the land and the vegetation and the soils, and also the transport of the winds by the atmospheric patterns. Next, please. So the Andes and the Amazon form a coupled system of mutual feedbacks. That means that the Amazon supplies water vapor via the winds and the aerial rivers to form precipitation in the Andes, but the Andes in turn return liquid water, runoff, sediments, and nutrients to the lowlands of the Amazonia. Of course, this water supply is required for agriculture, for hydropower generation, and many other purposes. For instance, this transport of moisture from the Amazon to the Andes is very important to maintain the water in the Andean glaciers that provide water for cities like Bogota, like Quito, like La Paz, and hundreds of towns in the Andes. And also, this moisture is transported, as I said before, to southeastern South America, reaching regions like the La Plata River Basin and even the regions of Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Next, please. Here you can see a very beautiful photo of a flying river in action, where you see the clouds and the rainfall over the open tropical rainforest of the Amazon River Basin. Next, please. Now I'm going to show you some of the examples of the deforestation as a growing threat to the functioning of the Amazon River Basin. Next slide. Here we show, this is a video. Can you run it, please? Yeah. Here we show the extent of this problem in the Amazon and tropical South America. This video is made with information from the Global Forest Watch of the University of Maryland, showing in red points the dynamics of deforestation between 2001 and 2023. It is estimated that between 18 to 20% of the tropical rainforest has been already deforested, and nearly the same amount of forest has been fragmented and degraded. Next, please. And fires also make part of deforestation in the Amazon and are becoming more frequent and more extended in the recent years. These processes are threatening, of course, the hydroclimatic, biogeochemical, and ecological functioning of the Amazon River basin, which is more worrisome given that fires and droughts feed back on each other in a positive manner that produces, which is contributing to reduce the resilience of the Amazon River basin hydrology. Next, please. Next, please. Next. 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 Thank you. So I'm going to show you just two examples of the impacts of deforestation on the Amazonian hydrology. As we saw in the video presented before, there is a cascade of moisture downwind in the Amazon that is at risk of collapsing owing to deforestation. Because due to the reduction of moisture inflow that reduces rainfall, this in turn reduces evapotranspiration and reduces the outflow of moisture transported by the flying rivers and by the winds over the Amazon and over tropical South America. So this deforestation can collapse this virtuous circle of the moisture downwind associated with deforestation. So we need to halt deforestation because otherwise these marvelous mechanisms of transport of moisture downwind is going to collapse with the impacts on not only on the ecology, hydrology, climatology of the Amazon River basin, but also on water supply to hundreds of cities and towns in the Andes and also in southeastern South America. Next, please. The other impact I'm going to discuss here is what Martin was referring to, because several scientific studies have shown that ecosystems can exhibit phase transitions when a critical threshold is surpassed. In particular, for the Amazon, diverse models show that if deforestation surpasses 20 to 25% of the rainforest, it may suddenly transition to a warmer, drier savanna-like ecosystem. That means that deforestation doesn't need to get to 100% to collapse the rainforest. This is more critical since the current deforestation of the Amazon reaches almost 20% of the forest. So this is a tipping point that we cannot allow to cross because all the functioning of the Amazonian ecosystem is in peril due to deforestation that could collapse the functioning of the forest and convert the ecosystem to a warmer and drier ecosystem like a savanna. Next, please. So how to get out of the crossroads that represents the permanent stress, tension between economic development versus sustainable development? Well, to face such a challenge, the Science Panel for the Amazon was created in 2019 in a meeting held at the United Nations headquarters in New York, convened by the Sustainable Development Solution Frame Network of the UN. Next, please. And since that event, we have been working in creating diverse documents, diverse statements, diverse participation in global meetings. One of the main products delivered by the science panel for the Amazon is the Amazon Assessment Report issues in 2021 at the COP26 in Glasgow. And nowadays, this report is known as the Encyclopedia of the Amazon. It consists of 3 books focused on first, a thorough discussion about the Amazon as a regional entity of the Earth system, with all those chapters that you can read on that list. Next slide, please. Second volume is the socio-ecological transformations and the changes that the Amazon have been experiencing in the recent decades, with the chapters that you can read also in this slide. Next, please. And the third book is the so-called solution space, in the sense that we are proposing a new development model for the Amazon associated with sustainable pathways for the region. Next, please. So the Science Panel for the Amazon has recommended 4 major urgent actions for the region. First, we need to impose a moratorium on deforestation in areas approaching a tipping point. Second, we need to reach zero deforestation and degradation by 2030. Next, please. Third, we need to restore and to remediate degraded and polluted terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. And fourth, we need to develop a vibrant bioeconomy of healthy standing forests and flowing rivers. Next, please. Among the recommendations of the Science Panel for the Amazon is the need to recognize, include, and involve the ancestral environmental knowledge in activities of environmental education and environmental discussions, as well as in decision-making and policy construction in the Amazon. In fact, several indigenous people from the Amazon are co-authors of several chapters of the 2021 assessment report of the Science Panel for the Amazon. Next, please. The Science Panel for the Amazon has also produced a series of policy briefs, as the one shown here, titled A Call for Global Actions to Move the Amazon System Away from a Tipping Point. But also several other policy briefs have dealt with the strategies for large-scale forest restoration in the Amazon, conserving the Amazon freshwater ecosystems, forest management for timber production and forest landscape restoration, also human impacts on carbon emission and losses in ecosystem services, also policy briefs on droughts in the Amazon, among others. So that way we are trying to contribute to reverse this problem and to refrain the deterioration and the degradation of the Amazon rainforest for the generations to come. Next one, I think, is the final one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gamboa, for your presentation. We will now proceed with our first panel discussion titled Water and Multidimensional Security, a Strategic Approach of Multilateral Organizations in the Americas. This panel will be moderated by Camilo Santa from the Inter-American Development Bank, who will introduce our esteemed panelists. We invite the panelists and the moderator to the stage, please, and we will be advising each speaker where there are 2 minutes left on your presentation, so you can conclude on your remarks. Thank you.
I believe we're short on time, so we may as well start. Thank you everyone for being here at this event, and thank you all our panelists for joining us. Basically, the idea is to connect the understanding of science and the socio-economic, basically, emergency we must address in the Amazon region. But we should probably start by understanding how this Amazon region is also inhabited by almost 5 million people. 50 million people? 50 million people you mentioned? From the Inter-American Development Bank, we actually just received the good news. We were approved a GCF project by 400 million to address the climate resilience of water security in the Amazon basin. And we hope with this resource we were going to be working in collaboration with your institutions. I would like to start with you, Martin, probably as a bridge to our other colleagues in the panel, to introduce why would you consider water security a multidimensional security affair, and why are we here right now in the OAS? Why would you think that this is a critical moment? You mentioned that we are in this year of the politics for the Amazon region, but probably it would be good to understand the relationship that OTCA has with the OAS and with other multilateral institutions, and how this partnership between organizations is important and relevant right now.
Thank you. Microphone? Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, I think we've all mentioned it this morning, so I don't think I will have to go into detail. I think we all mentioned that the Amazon is 20% of the sweet water, agua dulce. We mentioned that the trees in the Amazon produce 22 billion tons of water every day that come up to the Andean area, and Germán Poveda explained it and showed it very clearly how the water actually goes down to the Rio de la Plata, and how the whole economy of the Amazon and of the Andes depends on this flow of water. This some call the flying rivers, others call the aerial rivers, but the fact is that this is fundamental for the survival of the people, not only the rural people in agriculture, but a survival for the urban areas. And if we don't have the water, then we are going to have migrations, we're going to have problems, we're going to have violence. So I think that where we are, the water, and there's no need to explain that water is important for all of us, that's pretty straightforward. And as far as our relationship, we have signed MOUs with, I don't know if you have one with the OEA, but we have sort of collaborated, and we are working on the OEA works on water, works on indigenous people, works on several topics, peace, etc., which we are also working on. So we are close in that sense, and I think we'll be getting together soon to look into that. And then, of course, with the IDB and with the World Bank, we are also collaborating. And, of course, with, I don't know what your organization is called, Ava, but it is the NDC organization, right, that is coordinating all the NDCs. And for us, of course, that is fundamental, because that is the commitments of all the countries from the Paris Agreement. And that is what we precisely are going to look at in COP30 with the new agreements that are going to be established, and the ones, how far have we come. And so, this for the 8 countries is important that we work it together. So I would say that we have a direct relationship between all of us. I'm sorry, you represent which organization? MIT, of course, and of course what is very important with MIT is that we have what they call just the SPA, and that we have Carlos Nobre, who are setting up, and you've said of small models or not models, but the technological systems with the communities that you're setting up so they can give extra value. So from the whole economic point of view, alternative economies for the local, which are environmentally positive and good for, and the solution for the change we have to get into eradicating extractivism, MIT is playing an important role. So yes, we are all together in this panel.
Thank you, Martin. And maybe Mark, if you would like to follow on this line, thank you for having us at the OAS. What is OAS exactly doing in partnership with the ODCA and for the Amazon region? How do you see this water security and multidimensional awareness that we're trying to raise right now?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and specifically with regard to OCTA. First of all, the Organization of American States was fundamental in the original foundation of OCTA, actually working with partner countries and helping to establish its founding, and then helping to establish the executive secretariat that Martin now is running. So we have really roots from the very beginning of OCTA. I would suggest that we look forward to a deeper collaboration with you going forward. I would offer up the platform of the OAS and our work in the convening space, the political dialogue, and our technical assistance capabilities to really support OCTA in this fundamental work. Our roots within the Department of Sustainable Development, for which I'm the director, go back 60 years in the area of transboundary water resource management. And whether it's subterranean aquifers, rivers on the surface, or a flying river, all of the water is connected both in the hemisphere and globally. So fundamental to our work. We've been working with many partners, including OCTA, including our good friends at the Nature Conservancy and other organizations over this time frame on programs of transboundary water resource management in areas like La Plata, bringing together the many countries of the La Plata region. In Central America with Trifinio, with transboundary waters of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, Bermejo, and many other examples. So I think the concept of multinational collaboration and governance all the way to the level of operators of systems and mitigating the threats to water systems, including the critical challenges of deforestation, are really central to our roots and something that we look forward to supporting you within OCTA and all of the institutions here going forward.
Thank you, Mark. I would like to follow with you, Marcela, because I believe that this activity of politics, of bridging countries, having this transnational effort, will only work if we are supported by science, understanding, as we've seen, basically, making invisible the invisible, understanding this flying river, understanding how is it that technology can support, for example, in early warning systems, understanding the vulnerability of these 50 million inhabitants of the Amazon region is critical to understand exactly how is it that we're gonna reverse deforestation and actually start the regeneration of this ecosystem, building upon this natural capital and ecosystem services. But where is MIT in this whole organization and collaboration? Where do you see that the support that you're giving to this alliance? What could you share with us today?
Thank you, Camilo, and thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here with you all. So at MIT, climate change was declared the #1 priority. So the whole institution is looking for ways to support climate work and where specifically to insert scientific knowledge and technology into the challenge. I work at the MIT Environmental Solutions Initiative, and particularly from our program focused on natural climate solutions, we have been developing an approach that combines technology development with community-based planning to support some of the environmental challenges. And we have been working in supporting riverine communities in Amazonian cities, in Leticia and Mocoa in Colombia, and in Iquitos in Peru. And our model has focused on 3 pillars. And one is improving the technological infrastructure that's available to monitor ecosystem changes. The second one is strengthening the participation and the local capacities of the local institutions and communities to participate in this process. And the third one, fostering knowledge co-creation and sharing. And I want to zoom in. I want to offer an example of our work in Mocoa, because it shows how we have been combining the different components in this model. And so as some of you might know, Mocoa is a city in the Amazon Piedmont. It had a devastating landslide in 2017. It was caused by unprecedented rain. It killed over 300 people, affected 40% of the city, completely erasing some of the neighborhoods in the city, and also disproportionately affecting the low-income communities who settle on the high-risk areas. So in my first visit to Mocoa, Edgar Torres, a community organizer, asked us, should I stay or should I go? And as researchers, we were determined to answer this question. We started looking for the data, but what we found was a systemic lack of data to be able to respond to this particular question in Mocoa. And this lack of data was already resulting in delays in the reconstruction efforts for the city, in mistrust in the government institutions, and also an impediment to create consensus about some of the planning decisions and infrastructure development decisions for the city. So we know that many of the water-related risks are predictable when you have the right data. But it was a particularly hard challenge in Mocoa to collect the type of data that was needed. On one side, the mountains around the city of Mocoa are high slopes, covered in dense tropical forest, and very hard to access with traditional survey methods. And on the other side, the region has constant cloud cover, so it's also inaccessible with satellite imagery. So we started this engagement process. We met with over 40 institutions in Mocoa, in Bogota, here in Washington, D.C., and we created an alliance joining forces with the CAF Development Bank of Latin America, Corpo Amazonia, the Ministry of Environment, among many others, and launched a project to test the use of new technologies, such as drones and AI, to predict landslide susceptibility. So in this process, we trained the local pilots in drone data collection using LiDAR sensors. We created the architecture and the machine learning models to predict landslide susceptibility with 92% accuracy. And we also established a robust governance mechanism that included a community researchers network, so an innovative mechanism to strengthen participation from community members and to also start building trust in the data, which was one of the aspects that was lacking in Mocoa. So now we are in the final stages of the project, of the pilot project, and we know that this type of data could have many more uses because we have highly 3D scans of the forest. So it would be possible, for example, to monitor land degradation or changes to the structure of the forest. It would also be possible to monitor the populations of certain species of interest for the bioeconomy. So many more uses could be built up on these models. But the other aspect of it is that machine learning and AI models are dependent on the quality and the quantity of the data. So when we look at these models, we also need to think about the task force of local data collection that needs to be created. And when we start to think about this process regionally, like these models could become much more informative to all sorts of predictable climate risks and not just landslides.
Thank you, Marcela. it's really incredible the opportunity that we now have to understand the potentials of biotechnology, bioeconomy, to tackle the vulnerability of this population that, as Martin shared with us, is also the main drivers of deforestation. I mean, we cannot basically protect the Amazon if we are not taking care of the people that live in the Amazon. And in that sense, I mean, Pablo, the work that you're doing in the NDC Partnership Alliance, I mean, is also around creating partnerships, understanding the capillarity of the commitments, not only towards climate change, but also around nature and biodiversity, on understanding this asset, basically, that we have and that we need so much, not only for the region of South America, but for the world, as we've seen and understood. Could you tell us a little bit more about this NDC partnership? How are you using information, science, as Marcela shared, also to engage in these collaborations in different levels, in the policy also between national governments and subnational governments?
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be part of this conversation. The NDC Partnership is an international coalition that brings together countries developed and developing and international institutions, over 230 of those, to support developing countries advance their climate commitments through the development or updating of their nationally determined contributions or their country plans, or implementing them. And this is done in a way that looks not only at the specific process under the Paris Agreement, but very much connects the view of climate action and development, linking the two together. And of course, that brings together the conversations about biodiversity protection, pollution, basically tackling the triple planetary crisis that we live today in an effective way, because on the ground, of course, everything is combined. And this is where you see, for example, water as a critical element, because of course, it's on the one hand impacted by those crises, but also it's a critical solution to move forward. And that's where we need to have clear science, clear understanding, but at the same time, policies in place. You need to have the ownership and the drive and the coordination of all the relevant stakeholders on the ground to advance that sustainable development that needs to happen. So we start with supporting countries with their commitments to the international accords. You know, we have one on biodiversity, one on climate change, one on reduction of desertification. Those commitments that come from the countries are critical to drive action. They can be then embedded into national policies and send a clear signal in terms of the direction of travel of a government in terms of their development. And if we make sure that those include water as a cross-cutting element, we can make sure that the implementability of those and the effective mobilization of finance is better. But you can look beyond that, because of course we're talking about now national commitments. But as Martin was saying, when we look at water, water is not just a national element, it's a regional element. And when we look at the Amazon, it's critical to see collaboration across the different countries. So one of the things that we were discussing with Martin is how can we put a seed in the NDCs this year, because countries need to submit their NDCs in Belém or before Belém at COP30. And that will set the tone for the next 10 years of action based on those. How can we plant a specific seed from all countries in the region that will allow them to then effectively collaborate in the implementation? And in doing so, also send a strong message, because the main challenge that countries are facing today is how to effectively mobilize finance to do those things. They can commit to a lot, but if they can't mobilize finance at scale, it won't happen. So effectively, by bringing this collective effort and using spaces like COP30, but also the Amazon Summit in Bogota, then you're sending that political message that will allow to bring relevant stakeholders to the table, private, public, to try to drive that sustainable development in the region and to reduce the deforestation, which is the #1 area for emissions, greenhouse gas emissions by the countries in the region. No, it's very different from the rest of the world where energy, in most of the cases, is the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. And it's a lot more challenging. We now have the technologies, we have the financial systems to tackle the energy challenge with renewables, with efficiency, with electric vehicles, et cetera, but we don't have that same system that will allow countries to tackle deforestation, to drive restoration of ecosystems, to protect the forests in an effective way that brings the finance at the scale that is necessary. So great news to hear how organizations like the IDB are committing important resources to drive this. But as you very well know, we need to bring the private sector to get to the right scale. And we need to have the right plans for that sustainable development to thrive in those regions. So a lot needs to be done. It needs to be based on finance that makes sense. It needs to be built on science and on the right policies. And it needs to be a collective effort, bringing together collaboration across the government, across society, and at the regional and international level.
Thank you so much, Pablo. You have actually started to introduce our next panel about innovative finance and how to close the gap. But before I give the floor to my good friend Juan Carlos, who's going to be moderating that panel, and given though we don't have the time for a second question each, but maybe you want to share a last thought with the audience. Maybe you have a short, very brief reflection before we leave.
Sure, thank you. I think we have the elements in place for countries to find the way to commit to strong action, but we don't have the vehicles to drive effective implementation and mobilization of finance. And that's where I think that nexus approaches are critical. You know, how we bring together different elements, I don't know, climate, water, energy, or water, biodiversity, food, because that allows to bring the different commitments together and to drive more effectively the implementation of actions and mobilization of finance. And I think that the Amazon is a perfect region for those kinds of nexus approaches to drive action and transformational action on the ground. And I think it was very well described by the 3 points under the OTCA that Martin was describing that can enable that collaboration, bringing the different sectors and the different stakeholders to advance action.
I think we are in the challenge of translating data to knowledge and to action. And in that chain is where we need like the role of the different actors, and the multi-sector and intercultural collaborations are critical. Because from academia, we can contribute a specific aspect of it, but then we need to work closer together on the challenge of being able to translate that knowledge into actions in the territory.
Thanks, Marcela. I'll just conclude saying the conversation today in many ways gives me hope, because we have representation, just the tip of the framework of what is potential for collaboration. I mean, you know, highly respected university committing itself to the world's most urgent challenge, NDC partnerships, which in partnership with institutions like the GEF, GCF, World Bank, and the multitude of institutions, the regional banks represented by IDB, but CAF and others, and the regional institutions like OCDE that take on a specific regional challenge, but for global benefit. I think that together we offer the potential to really address this critical challenge. What we really need to bring it all together, the glue and the implementing force, is really the political will and the governance around this. Our governments from the United States all the way through the Americas that really commit political will and resources to make this happen. And so I think the collective efforts to drive the decision-making that actually commits to finding the solutions is the piece that brings me a bit of pause. But I think the will that we see around this table really is encouraging.
Thank you. I think there are a few points. One point I think fundamental is that when we're talking about the Amazon, we must see it as a system, as an ecosystem, all those 8 countries, and each country is doing what they have to do. it still brings them together because everything is interrelated. And if we don't understand how the system works, we will be tackling each point, but we will not really be tackling the whole system and the key points. That's one. I think another point which is important here is the participation of everybody. We have to get the participation of the local communities because they are the ones that live on the ground and they are the ones that ultimately see how we're going to protect the rainforest. They are the ones that are there. A third point I think important to highlight is that when we talk about the Amazon, we are combining, we're bringing together biodiversity and the climate, right? Biodiversity Convention and the Climate Convention. I think this is fundamental because they, in many ways, they do come together, particularly in the rainforest. And the last point I'd like to highlight, we don't have time. The time is gone. We've wasted it. And we haven't done what we have to do. We have 5 months for the meeting of the 8 presidents where they will decide what goes to COP30. And after that, the time is gone because then we will never get, or difficult to get the world interested or focusing on the Amazon because there are a lot of problems on the planet. So this is the moment that we have to take action.
Thank you all. I mean, for IDB, we are honored to be supporting governments and the region to value natural capital and ecosystem services and include them into the national accounts to understand development planning and probably what you've all said. We cannot wait for someone to come and save the region or come and solve everything. It has to be an empowerment from the people in the ground, from the countries who must raise to the challenge and use the capabilities we already have. We already know what we need to do. So thank you all. Thank you for the organization of the event. Let's follow with the logistics. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists and moderator. Now, a photo. Yes. While they're taking the picture, we will move on to our second panel titled Innovative Financial Mechanisms for the Protection of the Amazon Region and the Preservation of the Global Water Security. This panel will be moderated by Senator Juan Carlos Lozada of the Colombian Congress, who will introduce our panelists. We invite the panelists and moderator to join us on the stage, please.
Well, good morning to everybody. My name is Juan Carlos Lozada. I'm a member of Colombian Parliament and been working for many years in Amazonian issues like the deforestation, also crimes against nature and environmental laws in Congress. And for me, it's a very big honor to be here and be able to present this panel and talk to some of the biggest experts in financing of the Amazons, and also trying to look for a way of financing the conservation of the Amazon, especially the last great flying river, which is the main theme of what we're doing here this morning. So thank you so much to the OAS, or OEA in Spanish, for the invitation and the beautiful setting, and also thank you so much to Gaia Amazonas for always including us as parliamentarians. We have another parliamentarian here in this panel, Senator Estrada, indigenous parliamentarian from Vaupés in Colombia. We will be hearing from him in a minute. We have a set of extraordinary panelists. I think only one of them is just walking. She will walk in, Svetlana from the World Bank. But we have already here Meg Symington, who is the president of Global Integrated Programs for WWF, which actually does an extraordinary work also in Colombia. We have with us, as I mentioned, Senator Estrada. He comes from an indigenous community in the Vaupés in Colombia. We have Ralph Chami from Blue Green Future, and we're very eager to hear from you on how we're going to assess all this information about the flying river and its economical impact in the region, of course. And we have my very good friend Francis von Hildebrand, who is, of course, the leader at Gaia Amazonas for the past 20 years. So for us, it's a very big honor to have you here, Francis. I wanted to start maybe with a very general question that could put us in perspective of what's going on in the Amazons on the financial aspect. And basically, I would like to ask all of you, and then maybe I will pass some very specific questions to the single one of you. But maybe this one is a context question, and it's what are the challenges to finance the conservation of the Amazons? Why has it been so difficult for multilateral organizations, for the private sector, and of course now with the new reality of, for instance, USAID getting out of the Amazons, $25 million only for Colombia are going to be cut very in the near future. So what are the challenges, but also what have been the most innovative ways of financing projects in the Amazon that you can share with us today, and to tackle those challenges through innovative mechanisms of finances? This will be my first question, and I will pass the floor to you, Meg.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, and it's great to be here. Thank you for having me at this really interesting event. So we know if we want to maintain the hydrological cycle in the Amazon, we need to stop deforestation. We need to stop it now. The urgency is real with the tipping point looming. So we also know that the most effective means of stopping deforestation are protected areas and indigenous territories. We have good evidence that those stop deforestation. I work for WWF, World Wildlife Fund, and we have been working in the Amazon for many, many years. And we have found a model that we call Project Finance for Permanence, or PFPs, that we've been using to support systems of conservation areas at large scale for long-term financial sustainability. Protected areas in the Amazon have grown enormously over the last 30 years. but funding flows from governments haven't kept up, and that's the main problem we have. So how can we develop innovative financial instruments that allow governments to, over time, take on the full amount of funding that they need to run these systems of conservation areas? What the PFP model does is it is two key pillars. It's a very detailed conservation plan linked to a financial model that allows all of the fundraising and all of the funds needed to be identified up front. So you don't have any funding shortfalls over the course of these long-term projects. So for example, one of the flagship project using this model that WWF has been involved with since 2000 is the Amazon Region Protected Areas Program in Brazil, or ARPA, known as ARPA. It now supports 120 protected areas in the Brazilian Amazon. And we have good data. A scientific paper was just published in 2022 showing that from 2008 to 2020, the protected areas that received support from ARPA had about half the deforestation of other areas that did not receive the support. And that's because protected area managers need a long-term, dependable flow of resources in order to plan their management activities so that they can fight against the threats that are surrounding all of these areas. We then have taken that model from Brazil and replicated it in Peru. Patrimonio del Perú supports all 16 national protected areas in the Peruvian Amazon. And in Colombia, we have Herencia Colombia, which is a whole national initiative that has a big landscape in the Amazon that is being supported through that program. Altogether, those three programs secure financial sustainability for about 12% of the Amazon. So it really is a large-scale initiative. So one of the other things, though, that we've realized in the course of working on these programs is it's not enough just to protect. You need to build the sustainable development in that allow people to benefit from living in these areas, or to not have motivations and incentives to destroy the forest. So we're now adding on to ARPA in Brazil with an initiative we're calling ARPA Comunidades, which is basically taking the 60 sustainable use areas that are part of ARPA and developing real support for the value chains for the non-timber forest products and other livelihoods that the people there need to survive. And that way they can become stewards, they can have an incentive to conserve that forest over the long term. So that's just what I wanted to share, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan. Maybe we can pass the floor to Senator Estrada. So I'm just going to say the question in Spanish. Senador, la pregunta general era saber cuáles son los retos más grandes que tiene la financiación para la conservación en la Amazonía y cuáles pueden ser, si se quiere, los mecanismos más innovadores que se hayan implementado hasta ahora en términos de la financiación para la Amazonía, justamente para lograr la conservación del gran río y por supuesto de las comunidades que habitan en la Amazonía.
Gracias, Juan Carlos, colega del Congreso. Saludar a los participantes, agradecer al Padre Creador por estar acá, por poder compartir. Y Juan Carlos, me dicen los de la oficina que no entienden nada de inglés. Le digo, aprenderán, porque están viendo. Agradecer a la Fundación Gaia por la invitación, a Martín por estar al frente de la ODCA. También decir de entrada que estoy de acuerdo con la exposición de Martín, excelente, es por ahí. Esa es la línea, lo mismo que a nuestro embajador ante la OEA. De acuerdo con él. Decir que venía pensando en estos días desde la oficina cuando miro en la exposición de la innovación financiera y discutíamos primero para los pueblos indígenas entender qué es una innovación financiera, cuando comúnmente se habla del sistema económico. Ahí hay una gran diferencia entre lo financiero y entre lo económico, toda vez que lo financiero uno entendería viene predeterminado, son unas decisiones que se hacen desde afuera y se imponen a los países y en el caso nuestro hacia los territorios indígenas. Entonces ahí ya tendríamos que discutir de qué estamos hablando, si de decisiones de afuera o de decisiones en conjunto entre los que van a ser impactados con esos recursos, que serían los territorios indígenas, los campesinos, todo lo que existen en esa gran Amazonía, ¿cierto? Incluidos los mismos gobiernos, tanto regionales como del nivel general. Vuelvo a repetir, incluidos los participantes. Ahí hay una gran discusión. Nosotros, desde los pueblos indígenas, sí consideramos que este evento muy importante, creemos que es por ahí donde debemos empezar la discusión. Creemos que se debe unir la sociedad en general, porque bien lo decían en algunos de mis antecesores, aquí el debate es cómo vamos a pervivir la especie humana. Aquí el debate no es quién aporta más dinero, si lo aportan de este o de qué manera, sino la discusión de la pervivencia de la especie humana, porque el resto de la tierra, en culturas nuestras, en historias nuestras de origen, ya se quemó, ya se enfrió, ¿no? Ya se inundó, eso está en la historia de origen, por lo menos nuestra. Entonces aquí es, en las reglas que dejaron para que eso no vuelva a ocurrir, es que corrijamos eso. Pero nosotros en este asunto de lo financiero sí consideramos importante algunos aspectos que ya Martín lo decía, yo solamente lo repito. Uno, no es una discusión de cuánto dinero ingresa ahí, ¿cierto? Sin importar cómo se sigue viviendo, sin importar cómo vemos el mundo, ¿cierto? Aporto un dinero y sigo haciendo lo mismo. No, es un cambio de política, es cambio de actitud como seres humanos, en la forma de comer, de vestir, de ver el mundo, ¿cierto? Porque si de nada sirve que las políticas financieras no cambien, es decir, yo aporto determinado recurso y sigo haciendo lo mismo, pues el mundo va a seguir. La Amazonía sobre todo, este gran río sobre todo, va a llegar al punto de no retorno y eso no es cualquier cosa. Para muchos pueblos decimos que si nosotros como pueblo indígena rompemos las reglas, este tema de las dietas, este tema de las épocas o el calendario ecológico, no cumplimos con esas reglas de hacer en el caso de la Amazonía el yurupari o tomar yagé o mambear, ¿cierto? Que es todo un rito. Si no cumplimos eso que nos dejaron nuestros creadores o el Padre Creador, pues estamos incumpliéndole primero a la especie humana, segundo a la tierra, a todo lo que ahí existe y estaremos rompiendo ese ciclo. Entonces hay que cambiar esa política económica, cómo se invierte, pero también la forma de pensar, de actuar, de vivir. Nosotros sí creemos en eso, por eso Juan Carlos sí llamamos a que este tipo de evento no sea la primera ni la última. Me parece que es un buen principio en donde todos nos podamos entender. Ya Martín lo ha dicho, pueblos indígenas, su conocimiento,
los campesinos, los afro, la gente que vivimos ya en esa región de la Amazonía, para poder entre todos entendernos, comprendernos, pero entre todos aportar a que ese gran río no muera. Y al morir ese río, también se condenaría la especie humana que somos todos. Aquí somos todos hijos del mismo Padre Creador. Todos necesitamos el agua, todos necesitamos el sol, todos necesitamos la noche, todos necesitamos lo que existe. Así vivamos ubicados en distintas regiones del mundo. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, senador. Quería seguir entonces. I wanted to follow with you, Ralph. Of course, in the last panel, one of the panelists was saying that maybe one of the biggest challenges has to do with data and the difficulty of quantifying, for instance, what the flying river represents. I know you have a project for that, and maybe that will be one of the most innovative solutions to be able to tell the world as a region, the 8 countries, to be able to tell the world what this river really represents, not only in terms of conservation and indigenous community, but also for the whole world in terms of economics, for instance. So we would like to hear from you on that subject.
Sure. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Thank you, Francisco, for the invite. So let me just start at a 40,000 foot level and then just funnel down to this. Nature is incredibly important. I mean, but I'm a financial economist. We refer to nature as macro, critical to the economy, critical to our own survival. So you would think with the science, not only about the Amazon, but about nature and what it does for us, and the data and the proofs that we have, you would think it's a no-brainer. Money should be coming in to protect and safeguard nature. But actually, if you look at the amount of money that is dedicated to nature itself, it's woefully short. There's a report now a few years old from the Paulson Institute, basically says we need about $1 trillion to look after nature, of which we're receiving probably about 200 billion. And that's $1 trillion a year, per year. So we have a gap of about 800 billion per year. The numbers may differ, but it's really in the hundreds of billions. So if philanthropy is not enough and governments are distracted, where will the gap come from? Because if we don't bridge that gap, we are going to be witnessing during our own lifetime the demise of nature itself and its biodiversity. And I'm sorry to say with us, our own species becomes at risk. So where's that money going to come from? Well, the only sector left that hasn't really come into this space is the financial sector, the markets themselves. Because philanthropy has shown its limits, governments have shown their limits, and what's left is can we make the point to the markets that you have an incentive in the protection and restoration of nature. Guess what? Let me fast forward. A few days ago, the largest asset management company in the world with trillions of dollars under management, that is BlackRock, they issued a report. First statement in the report, it says natural capital is a new asset class. Behold, that means what they're really saying is what is natural capital is the stock and the flows. It's fauna and flora. By the way, natural capital, we are part of natural capital, just to remind everybody. So what they're saying is nature is a new asset class. What does that mean? Because when I was listening to my colleagues, and I've been in this forum many times now, when we talk about conservation, it's always with a cost proposition. We need to protect, and everybody starts thinking, oh my God, it's going to cost us. What we have never looked at is what is the benefit? What is the revenue side of the equation? That's what's been missing. What the financial sector is now saying, we've seen the potential revenue from nature being looked at as an asset. But not nature, let me clarify, not extracted nature, not dead nature. That we've abused and used. We're talking about nature living for itself. So when we look at the Amazon, when we look at the last flying river, that's the Amazon living for itself, meaning aware of itself, is producing this amazing flow of moisture which turns into water, right, and rainfall in the Amazon basin and abroad. What is the value of it? That's where we come in. What is the value, and what is the value at risk? Because we're talking about the risk of losing all of this. So what we're interested in, I'll fast forward to what we're doing, trying to do, is what is the value at risk from the loss of the Amazon forest, not only to the Amazon itself, but across the globe. And when you take something that is local or regional, and then you showcase to the rest of the world that, hey, you're also going to be impacted and affected financially, socially, politically, then everybody would have suddenly, and you can put a dollar amount to it. I spent 25 years at the IMF, okay? You can talk about biodiversity till you're blue in the face. If you cannot attach a dollar amount to it, no one is paying attention to you. What we can do is, if the data is here, if the science, that's why you have to start with the science, the data, then the financial side of this equation, which is what BlackRock is saying, can we look at nature as an asset class? Nature living for itself, living and thriving nature, and the answer is yes. So, bref, yes, we can look at the flying river, and we have to be informed by the science, by the data. Where does that flying river go? How does it impact the economies of the countries where that rainfall is falling? And then what we can do is funnel down to what sectors are impacted. No-brainer, agriculture, I'm sure, hydro, electricity, all these things. And if we can get enough data, sectoral data, we can then calculate all of that and then go back and say, look, that standing forest is impacting not only the Amazon basin, but regionally and globally, and we can attach the dollar amount. Then, I tell you, because I spent 25 years on the policy side, then the politicians and the policymakers would be interested. But the financial sector would be interested because it's affecting their bottom line. When they understand the dollar amount of it, when you can identify the risk, when you can measure the risk, as we all know in risk management, the third part, then you can manage it. And here would be, what can the world do to protect its own interest in the Amazon basin? So you go away from just saying, well, the Amazon is amazing and this, to basically saying, this is how it's going to impact your pocket. It's how it impact your society. How it impact, because it has impacts on poverty, it has impact on movement of people. We all know, climate, nature, people having, resilience in nature is resilience in the people, stabilizing people on their land. When you lose nature, you're destabilizing people. You get movement of people within borders, across borders, with all of the ramifications of all these things. I'll stop here.
Ralph, of course, that data is essential for policymaking, and it will be essential, for instance, for the 8 presidents that are going to meet in Bogota in August, because that's going to be a crucial, and Martin is here, it's going to be a crucial meeting because it's where our presidents are going to be able to coordinate what the position of the Amazonian countries is going to be at COP30, and of course to be able to show the world that kind of information from the regional governments, it's absolutely essential. I wanted to go to Pacho. Pacho, we call him informally. I'm sorry, Francis. I wanted to ask you, Francis, because Meg spoke about it a little bit, then Senator Estrada mentioned it. How can we ensure that the most innovative ways of financing reach the communities in the Amazon? I know you're an expert in territorial governments and for indigenous communities in the Amazon. That's what Gaia has been working on for more than 20 years. How can we ensure that the financing mechanisms really reach the communities that are the ones that are keeping for thousands of years the forest alive?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank as well the Colombian Embassy and General Parra. It's been a pleasure working together in making this event happen. And of course, the Organization of American States. Regarding that question, yes, and I'm going to chip in a little bit with the question before on the challenges that there are on bringing in these innovative financings on board. I think that, there's 2 big blocks. The first one is, as it was mentioned, that the Amazon rainforest has been really taken into just the environmental debate. And as we all saw, the impact of the flying rivers is about water security, food security, energy security. At the end of the day, it's about social and economic security across the continent and across the planet. This is a conversation to be had with ministers of finance, of agriculture, of health. We need to take this conversation to different sectors within governments and within different sectors of the public and private realm. It affects us all. And this is something where we've had a lot of lack of communication. That's why it's so important in processes such as valuing the flying river. But coming back again, what has been other missing components on making these mechanisms effective? The territorial understanding and the territorial expertise in the territorial vision. How indigenous peoples that we've had the fortune to be accompanying for many years understand and see what is the critical actions really to maintain not only the forest and biological connectivity, but the social and cultural connectivity which underlies the health of the forest. Healthy, strong indigenous cultures equals healthy forests. So there's so many dimensions that go into this. And that lack of information in the design of innovative financial systems many times is the recipe for a failed attempt. That is why it's so important. What do we do in Gaia Amazonas? We help build the bridges between cultures, between sectors. That's what we've been doing for so long. In Colombia with indigenous communities, across the northern Amazon region specifically, which is the region that upholds the last great flying river, we work together with partners to scale up high-impact proven solutions. And more recently, we've been engaging with partners from the financial sector, looking into, okay, what are the key ways that we can engage impact bonds, and how can we actually build this together with communities through the integration of what indigenous local governments and organizations are setting with their indigenous focus. How can we integrate this with governments? How can we look at valuing the flying river, as Ralph just mentioned? And I would like to, now since we're here, to make a public announcement. This is not just on the bucket list. We are working on this actively. And recently, in Gaia Amazonas, we've managed to secure the first $500,000 to start the work with Ralph Chamie for valuing the Amazon's flying river. This is going to be a critical input, as has been mentioned, for the presidential summit in August of the American states. So the ball is rolling, and we need to get together. We heard it from the Secretary General of the OTCA, we heard it from the OEA, we heard it from everybody. The time to act is now. And the opportunity to engage in cross-sectoral efforts is now. The solutions are there, the cards are there, the commitments are there, the roadmap is there. The time is limited, but here we are. So I think that the critical thing here is, yes, is not seeing just indigenous peoples as beneficiaries. No, they are key stakeholders. Half of the Amazon basin is managed by indigenous peoples. It's about building meaningful and truthfully respectful joint construction, as the senator was saying. And that's the challenge that we have at hand. Yeah.
Thank you, Francisco. And so I want to say hello to Svetlana and maybe ask the basic question that we started talking about, which is what are the main challenges for the financing of the protection of the Amazons that you have found, and what innovative mechanisms have been implemented that actually tackled those challenges in the Amazons?
Yeah. Thank you very much, and apologies for being late. I had a grand tour of Colombian embassy, then residency of the ambassador, and finally I made it to the Organization of American States. So To your question,
we were saying, you know, all the Latinos are here and you're not, so it must have been our fault or something,
yeah.
I guess.
Well, residency looks great, so I know we all will enjoy it this afternoon. To your question, so I have been working very actively and hands-on on the issues of the nature finance in Amazon and Latin America, and in particular through our collaboration with the government of Brazil over the last 2 years. And it has been an eye-opening experience personally for me. I have spent my professional life, which now spans more than 25 years, difficult to believe, working on different issues related to finance, but I really have been wondering why nature finance is so difficult, and why, despite of acknowledgement how important is nature, so little attention and money goes into it. And my personal explanation, after pondering about this for a few years, is that we as human beings are much more drawn to something simple. We build the plant, we know how to build it, we know how to destroy it and build something new. How do you approach nature, right? Which is so immense and so complex, and it's much easier to live your life jumping from one simple thing to another. Things which are worth one's life's work. One is how to measure nature, and second, how to create the completely new source of funding that could go into supporting certain dimensions of nature which never will be supported by existing mechanisms. So first, on how to measure nature. So Ralph started talking about this, and he used these words of how to put nature on balance sheet. So perhaps I will just try to explain this a little bit better. If you will open balance sheet financial statements of any big company, Coca-Cola or Adidas or any one of these, you would see this line which is called intangible assets, and it usually has a huge number in it. And what it is just the value of the mark. So the way it is measured is that if you are Adidas, if you were just a shoemaker and we are producing the same shoes, but you are the Adidas, what would be the difference in your revenue, right? So the concept of putting something intangible on the balance sheet, it's not new, right? The question is how to measure nature, which is once again very complex, and there are now attempts at address this, but there is still no consensus. But I do believe that in the next 2-3 years we will see the consensus emerging. Second question is related to how to find money that would go into this, because key issue is that a lot of nature-related challenges, they don't have the direct associated revenue stream. Classic example is conservation of standing forests, right? If you are not looking at the forest on the edge, which potentially has the opportunity cost, but if you look at the totality of the Amazon forest, so there is no immediate and obvious revenue stream. So the traditional money are not going to come there, right? So you need to find the way to generate a sufficiently significant revenue stream which would support conservation of standing forests. And this is what we have, what we are working with Brazilians and others through this idea of the Tropical Forest Forever Fund. So the challenges, once again, your question was, what are the challenges and how to overcome them? First challenge is to understand what exactly we need to address, which requires breaking down this big, huge, complex issue of nature finance into small pieces. Second is measuring, assigning, attributing certain value to these different pieces, and then based on the nature of the underlying challenge, trying to find the revenue source, the finance, which would be able to address that particular part. And as I said, I truly believe that unless we come up with something conceptually different, there is not going to be a solution. I'm sorry to sound so negative, but it is what it is. So to address the challenge related to nature finance at scale, there needs to be some kind of breakthrough, both in the economic thinking, financial thinking, and financial instruments. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Svetlana. Listening to all of you, I was thinking that also because Martin pointed out in his presentation about the tipping point, because this discussion will be very interesting if we had 20 years to make decisions, but we don't. And we have a lack of data that you all point out. In the last panel also it was pointed out. Martin asked a very suggestive question, which is, okay, governments have done their part. Today, 40% or at least 25% of the land in the Amazon is taken care by the indigenous communities, and another 25% is under some kind of governmental protection, but we're still collapsing. And when I hear Svetlana say, I don't want to be too negative, but this is a very big challenge that we are only starting to break down in small pieces and starting to understand what the way of the solution is. And I hear Ralph, for instance, starting to come up with a way of valuing the flying river, the Amazon. I mean, my last question for all of you will be, what are we going to do with time? Because this sounds, that we might be on the right way, we might be on the right path, but if we don't have time for it, what are the ways of pushing the accelerator forward in your perspective? What are the best mechanisms of making this faster? If there's any question, I think that will be my most important question, because it's a real concern for me.
Well, I think Pacho said, and Martin too, that this is the political moment with COP30 in the Amazon, in Belém do Pará, and we need to take advantage of that political opportunity. That's what I would say.
So I will focus on the consolidation of different efforts, and that is not limited to the governments. I am new to the environment community. I only have been working with this group of people for 2 years, and I was both impressed by the passion that many people put into this and their adherence to a particular set of ideas or initiative that they believe in. And I think that this kind of fragmentation of many beautiful ideas, it is also kind of killing an opportunity to do something big. So somebody got to give, and you need to identify 2 or 3 things which really can make a difference, and through your full weight, including indigenous people and local communities and advocacies and your outreach to governments, and then probably you will get somewhere. But if everybody will just sort of stubbornly follow in their particular set of things and work with their preferred philanthropies and their preferred organizations, you will be in the same place in 20 years. So.
Gracias. No, complejo. Yo creo que parece simple la pregunta, pero no. Nosotros vamos a seguir insistiendo en lo mismo. Si no hay cambio de actitud del ser humano, condenados a terminar. Condenados a terminar. Eso no tiene reversa. Entonces, los científicos que han dicho, 2030, ¿cuánto queda? Como 5 años. No tiene reversa. Entonces no basta con que vamos a seguir, por lo menos yo sigo insistiendo como indígena, que vivo allá, que soy de allá y que allá moriré. No basta con que pueden colocar todo el dinero que quiera. Pero si se sigue haciendo lo mismo, vistiéndonos lo mismo, comiendo lo mismo, pensando en que el ser humano es superior a la naturaleza y que estoy cómodo y que cada día tengo más dinero, acumulo más, sin importar al resto de los seres humanos, se perdió, nos perdimos. Entonces, en 5 años, con toda la investigación, con todas las pruebas, con todo lo que existe, demostrado por el conocimiento no indígena, el conocimiento científico que llaman, uno ve las actitudes de gobiernos cambian. Entonces aquí el quehacer es, vuelvo a insistir, en que todos, ojalá la región de la Amazonía, por lo menos, o por lo menos el cinturón del trópico, pudiéramos unirnos y defendernos independientes si hay o no hay recursos, demostrando que es necesario, que la vida está por encima de cualquier otra cosa, podemos avanzar. Y yo creo que el tiempo, Juan Carlos, sí es cierto, está encima, pero hay que hacer todo un trabajo de difusión, de información, de esa necesidad de mostrarle al mundo que todos debemos aportar con nuestras formas, no solamente con dinero, con la forma de ver el mundo, de hacer conciencia de que aquí es nuestra única maloca, decimos nuestra única casa, que es la tierra. Pues la verdad uno ve eso muy complejo. Yo pienso mucho en eso y sigo pensando es más en esa actitud que la que uno hace allá todos los días de seguir protegiendo la Amazonía. Pero vuelvo a insistir, yo creo que este tipo de eventos, así suene que es unas pocas personas por allá pensando en locura, no, sí sirven, sí se demuestran. Y si no empezamos, nadie lo va a hacer. Yo creo que hay que hacer, y hay mucha gente. Yo estuve en Belén de Pará hace 2 años y eran mucha gente que quieren defender, que están defendiendo, ¿cierto? Ahora en Cali, mucha gente. Yo creo que es toda esa cantidad de personas que, hombres y mujeres, jóvenes, y todo lo que están ahí, indígenas y no indígenas, yo creo que sí hay que buscar, Juan Carlos, mecanismo de poder unirlo y seguir ahondando en la defensa de nuestra gran maloca, que es la tierra.
Sure. And I cannot do justice to the question, which I think is a very important one, but I actually am quite optimistic and quite bullish on this. First of all, you know, I'm always reminded of my mom, who used to tell me, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So, and I've been a practitioner in the financial markets for 32 years, so I'll tell you something. We can price even when there's imperfect data. So if you're waiting to have perfect data, that's an excuse for inaction. Okay? We start and you perfect later. Let's just start. But take heart. Let me go back to something I said. The largest asset management company in the world with trillions of dollars at their disposal, BlackRock, 2 days ago said nature is a new asset class. Let me clarify what they meant by that. Conservation has never bothered to look at markets. So markets have had a very bad relationship with nature, with the living nature. Markets have had a very good relationship with dead nature and extracted nature. What BlackRock was heralding to everybody was saying, now we see the light in the living nature. Let me use terminology. Nature has at least two functions. One is called the provisioning side, food, gas, oil, you know, all that stuff. But there's another side of nature, and that side we know how to price very well. What we never thought had any value was the regulating side of nature, nature that regulates climate, nature that enhances quality of the soil, of the water, and so forth. That's what BlackRock was talking about. They're saying this is the new asset class, because the other one we already know how to price it. That is a game changer, because before you ask for action, you have to change the mindset. The mindset is very important, change in the mindset. And what the financial markets are saying, now we see the value in the living nature living for itself. Now, what we have to do, we have to reach across not point fingers at each other because we are in the 11th hour. We need to reach across and bring them on board and say, okay, let's fix this problem. Thing with markets, they're not politicians, so with all due respect to all, they can move very quickly. They have the resources, and it's the tail that wags the dog, with all due respect. So let's engage the markets, but we engage the markets under conditions. One, nature will be looked after in perpetuity, nature. And two, you cannot look after nature in perpetuity if you don't look after the stewards of nature in perpetuity. And that means the IPLCs, indigenous peoples and the local communities. So I cannot do justice to this. All I'm going to tell you is this is how we're approaching it. We are actually creating markets around the living nature that is nature positive and that is equitable. Take heart. It's going to happen sooner than you think.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It is
That's all?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, good. It's a tricky question, and I agree with my friend, the Colombian Senator Estrada, that we do need a system change. But in order to have a system change, you need to first have a system, a motivation, and a system engagement. And I think that we are on a very fertile ground. We've heard it today. We've had today. It's been an amazing pleasure and honor to see these two panels, see people from the multilateral sector, see people from the government sector, civil society, private sector, civil society, with the clarity that now is the time to engage. And in order to motivate different sectors, of course, we need to be able to communicate to these different sectors on how water joins us all, on how there is this active interest that we all have. And that's what we're doing now. I think we have a great opportunity on the way to the presidential summit and on the way to the COP30. But let me be clear, it does not mean to solve all problems of actor engagement from here to the presidential summit of the Amazon, nor to the COP30. It is about having a very clear commitment between industry leaders and sector leaders to join efforts with this common topic that joins us, which is water security for multidimensional security that depends on nature, as my friend Ralph says, not as a resource, but as a source. This is so important, and we are on the way to do that. People say that we need to act within the next 4 or 5 years. We need to move from the sad phase to the happy phase on how we are relating with the Amazon. We don't have to, have to solve everything now this year, but we do need to make a fundamental shift on how we're approaching the Amazon as a source and not as a resource. And that's what's happening now. That's why it's a pleasure to hear all of these different institutions with that same message. It's a pleasure to hear the different institutions offering as well their platforms. No? And there is a follow-up to this event that we're having today, of course, as well, and joining efforts with multilateral organizations, private sector, financial sector. So I'm optimistic as well. There is a very realistic chance that we can make it. There is a lot of results. 67% of the northern Amazon region that upholds the flying river is already under a certain form of protection areas. There is expertise, there is the knowledge, both indigenous and non-indigenous. The cards are there. But most definitely, that intention that has been pronounced today by all the panelists, we need to bring it into concrete action plans in this year. And with that, I'll wrap it up for now. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Pacho. It gives me optimism that you guys are optimistic. Not all of you, but most of you. I agree with Meg that COP30 is a very big opportunity for political will to be more effective in terms of the protection of the Amazons. I agree with both Pacho and Senator Estrada that a cultural change is absolutely necessary. And I definitely agree with our most financial part of the panel, which is Svetlana and Ralph, in terms of that we don't have to we don't have to have everything clear and perfect to be able to go forward. And well, I studied philosophy in university, and I remember Immanuel Kant used to say that the only thing that he never understood is why, if we know what we have to do, we just don't do it. And I think that still stands today. Hopefully, the next months, through the presidential meeting of the Amazon Treaty to COP30, we're going to figure it out that it's only a matter of taking the first steps, which I think I agree with Senator Estrada. This kind of panels and this kind of conversation is the first step towards the solution. So thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you so much to the panelists and moderator. Can you stand up, please, for a picture? And I would like to introduce the General Cesar Parra, Head of Cooperation, to give us a brief conclusion.
Quédense ahí, tranquilo, quédense. Ahorita. Bueno, un saludo para todos. En nombre del señor embajador, nuestro embajador de Colombia en Estados Unidos, un saludo muy especial. Termino haciendo un resumen de la actividad hoy tan importante, el contexto de la Amazonía. Hemos escuchado a Martín, a todos los ponentes, y creo que el contexto de la Amazonía tiene que ver con el conflicto armado, tiene que ver con las dinámicas sociales, económicas y políticas que afectan la Amazonía. La deforestación, la minería ilegal, pero también la no cultura. Aquí acabamos de decirlo, el hombre no tiene la cultura y destruye la tierra, destruye los árboles. En ese sentido es importante la articulación estatal de los gobiernos, de todos los actores en el territorio, con una base fundamental que es la territorialidad y buscar el actor importante que son nuestros indígenas. La Amazonía, el Gran Río Volador, requiere la articulación del Estado, requiere mecanismos de financiamiento que puedan generar allí los recursos importantes para aportarle a la Amazonía. Martín lo decía esta mañana, cómo desde ese centro de gravedad que es la ODCA se está buscando el trabajo de los países y la hoja de ruta para la COP que va a ser la cumbre de presidentes y la COP30 en Brasil. Es importante aunar esfuerzos, es importante la educación, como decía Marcela, la tecnología, la innovación, buscar esas dinámicas que nos permiten a nosotros de verdad hacer una hoja de ruta conjunta. Este evento ha sido muy importante, pero que nos permite generar un espacio y una línea estratégica de liderazgo para llegar allá. Como decía el senador, nuestro senador, ¿cómo podemos empezar? Y estamos empezando esa actividad. Así que esperamos que en el día de hoy tengamos esas lecciones aprendidas tan importantes. Cada uno de ustedes nos aportó muchas cosas. Gracias a la compañía de ustedes hoy, gracias al señor embajador que nos acompañó, a todos ustedes que vinieron de otros países, a la gente que nos escucha en este momento, pero nuestro reconocimiento y aprecio también para nuestro embajador Daniel García Peña, que no pudo estar acá, nuestro sentimiento de aprecio y respeto a él. Así que terminamos esta actividad agradeciéndolos, invitándolos a la Embajada de Colombia esta tarde. Tenemos un evento muy importante. Gracias por asistir y un aplauso para todos ustedes.